marine wildlife. All of our lesson topics are going to cover a plethora of topics in ocean conservation and marine science. We've actually put together lesson plans with at-home activities for every single lesson. On top of that, there is an interactive quiz for every topic as well, so you can really continue that learning and check those benchmarks to see what you are learning. We have a lot of ongoing partners with the school district of Palm Beach County, so we're always doing virtual programs with them. This is just more of an opportunity while the students are out of school, connect with everybody while we can. Well, for right now, what's happening in our world, we are restricted to Facebook Live and YouTube videos, but we hope one day we will reopen, hopefully someday soon, and we hope to see everybody back here in our outdoor hospital at Loggerhead Marine Life Center.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, the board will participate in 3 meetings. We'll start with a workshop on policies, followed by a special meeting, and lastly, our tentative budget adoption will take place at a time certain of 5:05 p.m. We haven't finished the special meeting by 5:05. We will suspend the special meeting to start the time certain tentative budget adoption hearing. All 3 meetings today will be conducted using Google Meet technology for board members and staff who are participating live. Viewers and listeners can access the meeting today by either watching on Comcast channel 235 or by using the YouTube link on our webpage at palmbeachschools.org. We also offer a listening only option, which the public can access by calling 561-357-5900 or toll free at 1-866-930-7015. The meeting ID is 1-561-880-1124 hashtag. I now call the workshop to order at 3:30 p.m. on July 29, 2020. Mrs. Bass, please call the roll.
District 1, Barbara McQuinn. Here. District 2, Chuck Shaw.
Here.
District 3, Karen Brill.
Here.
District 4, Erica Whitfield. Here. District 5, Frank Barbieri.
Here.
District 6, Marcia Andrews. Here. District 7, Deborah Robinson.
Here.
We have quorum with all 7 board members present. Also joining us on the virtual dais is Superintendent Dr. Donald Fenoy, General Counsel Julie Enrico, Inspector General Teresa Michael, and Board Clerk Carol Bass. Senior staff members will join us periodically as directed by the Superintendent. This meeting is being transcribed by a closed captioner, so remember to speak at a reasonable pace. Now please direct your attention to the flag on the screen. Dr. Fenoy, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy. A quick review of our meeting protocol. Excuse me. Remember, if you are not speaking, please turn off your microphones. Board members, if you need to step away from your computers for a moment, please turn off your camera. For the public's information, when a board member's camera is off, the board member is still present at the meeting and can still hear and see what's happening. Mr. Superintendent, we can start with the, we have no agenda topic speakers at this point for the workshop.
I don't believe we have any speakers. Would you like me to go forward, Mr. Barbieri?
Yes, sir.
Yes, at this time, I'll turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Keith Oswald to introduce the team who are presenting our Student Code of Conduct Policy Workshop.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy, and good afternoon, board members. Dr. Sheffield and Ms. Issa will be coming on to present some proposed changes for our upcoming board policies on Student Code of Conduct. Dr. Sheffield?
Yes, good afternoon, board members and Dr. Fenoy. June Issa, our Assistant Superintendent for Student Wellness, at this time is going to provide us with an update on 2 Student Code of Conduct policies. So I'm going to immediately turn it over to Mrs. Issa. June.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Just a nod of heads if I can know that you all see it. Great. Okay, I'm going to move forward then. Each year around this time, we come forward to you all with the changes that are required by statute for the Student Code of Conduct. We have 2 Student Codes of Conduct, 5.1812, which is the elementary version, 5.1813, which is the secondary version. The changes are identical in both of the codes, so they're being presented to you today as one. The proposals that we're going to be sharing with you today are 2 types. The first one is the ones that are required by the Florida DOE, which are the CESR codes. We get definitions from the state that we have to incorporate into our Student Code of Conduct. I'm going to review. We have 4 new codes and definitions that they have asked that we put into the Code of Conduct starting for this upcoming year. And then the second one are local discipline codes. Those are usually driven by our principal discipline committee that brings forward suggestions for additional codes that they need for the operation of their school centers. The first one that came from the state is actually just assessor code, and it is opioids. They have actually called out the definition for opioids. As you can see in the definition, it's fentanyl, oxycodone, morphine, etc. This will not be outlined in our student code of conduct. It will be assessor code that's sent up to the state. If we have a student that is actually found in possession of these, they would be coded as a drug charge, but then we would, inside of the system that we have internally, we'll actually list it as an opioid. The second one is actually they've reworded the actual drugs. So now it includes possession of any drug, narcotic, controlled substance when used for chemical intoxication. Very important, the difference with use means the person is caught in the act of using, admits to the use, or is discovered to have used in the course of an investigation. And this is a level 3 offense. And then the final drug code that's changed, and this is a level 4. They've changed the wording in this: the manufacture, cultivation, sale, or distribution of any drug, narcotic, controlled substance, represented to be a drug, narcotic, or controlled substance. This is a level 4 offense, and sale of drugs would be up for expulsion. And then the final new code that the state has asked us to incorporate is threat and intimidation. We presently have a level 2 code for threat, non-criminal. This is a step above that. And if you read the definition, it talks about no physical contact between the offender and the victim, but the victim felt the physical harm could have occurred based on verbal or nonverbal communication. And the example that they gave us was, for example, somebody brandishing a weapon and threatening to harm someone. And that would be a level 3 offense. We still have our level 4 offense, which is a high level threat, for example, to maybe a school center or to an individual. And then the last slide for the presentation is our proposed new local codes. The principals did ask us if we would incorporate a code for the sale or distribution for vapes. We have a number of incidences last year where students brought manufactured vapes, meaning that they put in not the intended article inside of the vape, and we had students that were transported to the hospital. So we didn't have a code strong enough for us to handle that type of incident. So they've asked us if we could add a level 3 vape sale distribution for when there's that type of outcome from that sale. And then the final codes that we're asking for are from our online learning. We are asking that we be able to incorporate a virtual suspension, 4 different codes. They mirror our out-of-school suspensions. The first one would be for 1 to 2 days, 3 to 5, 6 to 9, and 10 days. Again, those are for incidences that would have warranted an out-of-school suspension if we were in brick and mortar. And that concludes the workshop. Open for questions.
Mrs. Whitfield and Mrs. Brill.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about this virtual suspension. So from speaking with Mr. Oswald earlier today, it's my understanding that they would be suspended from participating live on the class, but that they could still come back later and watch those classes so they could keep up. Is that true?
That is correct. That is similar to what we do with an out-of-school suspension. They would be not entitled to the live, but then they would be entitled to get all of the work and make up that work. And because they're recorded, they'll be able to see the class as it went live for the other students.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Brill.
Thank you. So since we're discussing the student code of conduct, my questions are actually related to our distance learning. How are we communicating our expectations to parents and students for student conduct and attendance during distance learning? And also, for example, like the student dress code. I've had some parents that have said to me, you know, my child wears uniforms, I want them to do it. I said, well, that's your responsibility. But according to the student code of conduct, if I'm understanding correctly, the dress code would also apply while they're in distance learning. Is that correct?
That is.
I'm sorry. And then how are we communicating this?
So yeah, that is correct. all of those expectations would be done by the classroom teacher and the principal at the school. So each of them have different dress codes based on what they have approved at their school centers. That would be how the expectations. Our handbook also outlines our expectations in brick and mortar, which extend. Also, we have added a disclosure at the very beginning of the portal, at the very, very time that they open the portal for distance learning, where it says that the expectations are that you will follow the same rules and student code of conduct that we had when we had in brick and mortar.
Go ahead.
So then as a follow-up, for the schools that have a uniform, there are some parents that still will not walk into a school, and perhaps they can't order online. Is there going to be flexibility for those, because children outgrow their clothes every year? How are we going to handle that?
Glenn, I don't know, Dr. Sheffield or Mr.
Let me answer that. I think when it comes to school uniforms, I'll follow back with the team. I'm not going to make kids wear uniforms while they're at home. That just doesn't make any sense. So since we don't have a uniform policy, it's not consistent across the district, I think we just stick to decency. They're at home, but I'm not going to make people put on school uniforms sitting in their own houses. That's, so we'll clear that up for you, Ms. Burrow.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, the reason I was bringing it up is if we're basing it on this student code of conduct, obviously there is going to have to be some flexibility, and I appreciate that. So, what I told the parents that have told me they want their children dressed like that, I said, well, you're the parent. That's your responsibility. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, let's just make sure, team, that we follow up with the principals for those. I honestly, off the top of my head, don't know how many schools have mandatory school uniforms. But let's get that list and let's let them know that we're not going to require them to wear uniforms while they're sitting at home.
Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And I do understand the new changes coming down from the state. But when a child is involved in drugs, sale or using the drugs, and it's not listed in the policy, but there is a spot that should be in place for specific counseling, mental health counseling, and going to the drug court. Can you talk a little bit about how that works when a child is actually committing one of these offenses?
Sure. We actually don't outline it in the student code of conduct, but it is an action. It's part of the responsibilities of the school administration for us to be able to refer the students, first of all, to an alternative to suspension for drugs and alcohol. We still have an alternative to suspension program, and then also for drug court if they qualify. So those are actions. We don't list actual incidents or actions inside of the student code of conduct.
I just think it should be, parents should know that piece as we begin to do this, because this is like a sickness, and there should be some of the counseling mechanisms in place for mental health and support for these children. Thank you.
Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. I have three areas of questioning. So to start with the drugs. So this was about sale and distribution. Can you scroll back to that so that I make sure I'm right? So manufacture, cultivation, sale, and distribution. So this is not about use, correct?
That is correct. This is just sale.
Okay. And then was there a previous?
One is for use.
So if they admit to use, last night at home, do they get coded under this and punished?
Not if they didn't use it on our campus or prior to coming to our campus. Mm-hmm.
So can we specify that? I don't know how it's outlined in the student code of conduct, but can we specify that we are talking about admitting to use on campus or being under the influence on campus? If that's what you're telling me this means, can we clarify that?
Yes, I'll get back with legal and look at the definition, and based on what the state has provided us, we'll see what we can come up with. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And then on the threat and intimidation, so tell me how that definition, will we still have our level 2 threat?
Yes, ma'am.
And tell me how they differ, please.
This one is where the individual actually felt that there was physical harm. The other one might be, I'm going to beat you up after school. I have 6 friends, but there was, no opportunity to feel that there was physical harm that could have occurred. This one, they use the definition to make it a little bit stronger by, I'm in the hallway and I catch up with somebody and I take out a knife and I say, I'm gonna cut you after school, don't tell on me or something of that sort. So there's a definite fine line between a level 2 offense and a level 3 offense.
Yeah, I would agree. It sounds like it's a very fine line because those 6 friends that could come to beat me up, I might know that 3 of them are really big, and I'm going to interpret that. I'm going to tell the school administrator that I was afraid for my life, and it's going to automatically make it up to this level 3.
Well, there'll be an investigation and they'll talk to the witnesses and what have you. But yes, it will depend on what they actually determine. For an example, if I brandish a weapon, it's going to come to a level 3 offense. If it's just a verbal comment that was made, it's going to probably, I won't say definitely all the time because there's always nuances, but it will stay at a level 2 offense.
Okay, so listen, what I know for certain is in the outside world, and you know what I'm gonna say, I see you smiling. In the outside world, all I have to do is say, but I was afraid for my life, okay? And that didn't change what the other person did, and I didn't have to actually be afraid for my life. So I just want us to monitor that carefully, because there's a lot of subjectivity potentially. If they brandish a weapon, that's done, I get that. But these other verbal threats of physical harm, that, and so to my last question or point is, who is it that looks at the disciplinary data disaggregated on a regular basis so that in 6 months, who do I ask about any disparities that exist between the threat level 2 and the threat level 3?
So we train the school centers for them to look at their own data as well. But inside of my division, you have individuals in the Department of Safe Schools. You have, specific individuals, and there's 3 or 4 of them who look at the data on a regular basis.
Okay, and so my only request is that looking at that disaggregated data contained within that represents discipline consequences, that be taken to at least to the CAO. I would hope to the executive team, right, on whatever the appropriate intervals are, maybe once a semester or marking period. But somebody needs to monitor that, like honestly, other than me. Like you guys need to catch it so that you can intervene when you see disparities occurring at various locations. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And Dr. Robinson and other board members, that is how we build in our professional development. We will look at the data and make sure that it's being used appropriately, especially when we have new codes, such as you're outlining here between a level 2 and a level 3. So yes, ma'am.
And what I think we should do is, I think that data should be reviewed regularly by the regional offices. And then what we'll do is at executive cabinet, we'll figure out a cadence for us to have that roll up. What I think what makes most sense is maybe once a quarter, I'll have the regionals actually report to executive cabinet on those realities in their particular region. So that's what so Ed, put that on our list, and we'll make that part of the expectation of the regional office to review that data.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy.
Ms. Issa, I see no more questions from board members. Do you have anything else to present to us, Dr. Fenoy?
Mr. Barbieri, not for this particular workshop. We're done with this, and we'll move on to our next meeting if you're ready.
Yes, sir. We need a motion by a board member to adjourn this meeting. Motion by Ms. Brill, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield. All in favor? Opposed? Carries 7-0. Now call the meeting, the special meeting to order. Board Clerk, Mrs. Bass, I don't think you need to take the roll again. You can show all 7 board members are still there. I can see everybody still present. We have no items added for good cause. Mr. Superintendent, are you withdrawing anything today?
No, I'm not withdrawing, but if I could have Ms. Issa unpresent her screen, I'd appreciate it.
Board members, are there any items you wish to pull from the consent agenda? Dr. Robinson.
Yes, I think I need to ask legal if this is something I need to pull to make the changes in the student code of conduct that I suggested, the clarification there about the use of drugs and so forth. Do I need to pull those to do that, or is that Scribner's?
Well, that was just, correct me if I'm wrong, presenters, but I believe that, are you talking about what you just discussed? That was
Yes,
workshop?
it's on the agenda now.
Yeah, I would go ahead and pull it then.
Okay, so I'd like to pull both of the student codes of conduct.
Okay, anything else? All right, we need a motion to approve the agenda as motion to approve the agenda as modified. Motion by Mr. Shaw, second by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Takes us to agenda items. Speakers, we have none at this meeting. So we're down to new business. I'm trying to remember which buttons we push. Is the control F5?
Actually, if you'll vote on the consent agenda, that was the regular agenda, now the consent agenda, and I am in the process of moving those two items that she just pulled. And so in a minute, F5 to refresh.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the consent agenda then. Motion by Ms. Brill, seconded by Mrs. Andrews. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. I see they've been moved. No, they haven't. Is it Control F5, Mrs. Bass?
Hopefully it's just F5 or the little round circle up at the top.
Give me a minute, folks.
Yeah, Mr. Barbier, I just refreshed. It may not quite be up yet.
They are down under new business, so if you refresh now, you should see them.
All right, Mrs. Bass, it won't work on my computer, so just tell me which item's next. Is it P1?
P1, yes.
Superintendent, P1?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I recommend the board approve the personnel agenda as revised.
Motion by Mr. Shaw, second by Ms. Brill. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next item, Mr. Superintendent, I'm not sure which one that is, but you can see it on your screen, I think.
Yes, sir. It is POL-A1 Policy 5.1812. I recommend the board approve the development of proposed revised policy 5.1812, Student Code of Conduct for Elementary School Students K-5.
Motion by Ms. Brill, seconded by Mrs. Andrews. Dr. Robinson, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This is just to ask that, and I don't have the exact location or the wording, but that this be tweaked to specify that the use of drugs in the policy specifically refers to on campus or under the influence, in addition to the other notes.
All right. Do we have a second on Dr. Robinson's motion? Motion by second by Ms. Brill. Any further discussion? Mrs. Rico, do you understand exactly what the change is?
Yes, the team between Ms. Issa and Ms. Carmona have those items, and they'll then bring those back when we have second read.
Okay, Dr. Fano, are you okay with the change?
Yes, sir, I am.
All right, no further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next item, Mr. Superintendent, is POL-A2.
Yes, sir. POL-A2, Policy 5.1813, Student Code of Conduct for Secondary School Students 612 in development. I recommend the board approve the development of the proposed revised Policy 5.1813, Student Code of Conduct for Secondary School Students 612.
Motion by Ms. Brill, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield, discussion, Dr. Robinson?
Yes, same discussion. Request that it be reworded to specify that is admits to use on campus or under the influence, in addition to the wording here.
Second on Dr. Robinson's motion by Mrs. Andrews. Any discussion? Mr. Superintendent, are you okay with that change?
Yes, sir, I'm fine with that change.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That's the end of the agenda items. We now go to board discussion items. Mrs. Rico?
Did you vote on the entire policies in addition to the amendments?
I don't believe we did. So
okay.
back to BD1. We've got an amended BD1. No, that's not BD1. POL1, we have an amendment to POL1. Let's vote on the main motion now with the modification that Dr. Robinson made. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Same for POL2 with the modification that Dr. Robinson made. We'll vote on the main motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That takes us now, thank you, Mrs. Rico. That takes us now to BD1, board discussion item, Mrs. Brill, future school start dates.
Thank you. So I started this discussion about a week ago, although it's been going on for quite some time. We've discussed as a board the possibility of starting later our school year. The main objection we've had over the discussions has been the gap in pay. So we're now in a situation where if we decided to start a little bit later, there would be no gap. My preference would have been to start as late as possible, but I understand that parents, teachers, and principals are concerned about ending the semester before the holiday break. So I'm completely understanding of that. But what I would like to do is to instruct the superintendent to come back, speak to the calendar committee and see, and I guess we could override it, but I would like us to not start school any earlier than the third Monday in the month of August. And that would mitigate any problems in terms of testing rather than going with the fourth week, but it would also make it so that we're not starting as early as we had planned this year.
Anybody else want the Mrs. Whitfield? Mrs. Whitfield, you had your hand up and you went to push your button and you disappeared. Yeah, there you are.
My power went out here, so I had to get on my phone. So a little bit of a learning curve. So Mrs. Brill, you were talking about for next year, is that correct?
I am speaking about from next year going forward. So that future calendars that we look at the third week, the third Monday as the first start date, no earlier than that. So we don't wind up starting less than 2 weeks into the month of August.
So my opinion on that right now is that we should wait to have this discussion until we're through this current crisis that we're in. I know we need to plan ahead, but I feel like there's just too many things going on to have this discussion. And I would really like, we could create a workshop around it and have the calendar committee plan for it. But I think it needs to be in at least a couple months' time. I really feel like the staff has just way too much on their plate at this point.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. I do agree with Ms. Whitfield. We're in really turbulent times right now, and I know that we want to plan ahead and do what we have to do, but I truly know that I want that input from the calendar committee, which represents all of the different factions of the school district of Palm Beach County, our teachers, our bus drivers, all of our unions, as well as others to give us input. And this is a day-to-day process that we're in right now. So I'm hoping that once we can kind of see some clearance at the end of the tunnel, then maybe that committee can have some discussions and working with the board as we move forward.
Go ahead.
So just as a follow-up, we have planned ahead our calendars, and this is an ideal opportunity since there won't be a pay gap. So I understand there's a lot of, I don't mind putting it off for a couple of months, but the main objection has always been that pay gap. And I understand that there are some recommended policy changes that are coming forward, as well as our bargaining agreements. So I think this is an opportune time as we move forward with that. But I wanted to put that out there because it just happens that we're not talking about a big change, we're talking about a week. So when we are ready to look to next year and to refine that calendar, I think the superintendent kind of knows already where we're going with this, but I think that we just need to chime in. You know, we did vote on a change prior, and we were split. So I just want to put that out there because the main objection, as I said, was the pay gap, and that is not going to exist at this point.
Mrs. Rico, I saw your hand up.
No, I think Mrs. Brill addressed it. I mean, there are policy changes, et cetera. We had issued you all some guidance on that. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Brill, I agree with you. I also agree with the other board members who we should postpone it. Just in my discussions today with the superintendent, he suggested that we probably should hold off giving the administration any more work to do right now with everything that they're already have on their plate. So if we can hold off on giving them any more directions on things we want changed until they figure out how we're going to reopen our system. Ms. Brill.
Thank you, and I'm fine with that. I really, to be honest with you, was just so excited that the opportunity might exist to make that change that I really didn't give that consideration. So yes, and I would like the superintendent, once he has the opportunity to socialize it through the bargaining units, through the principals, you know, making sure there's no impact on testing and making sure that it won't put us in a precarious situation. So yes, let's push it down the road, but make sure it stays on our radar.
Yeah, we'll put it on the list. We will at some point bring back a workshop. I'll put it on our list so that it's memorialized, and we will do that. We'll do that. I got you.
The next item is BRD 2, and I can't see it because my computer's froze up here. So whoever's on BRD 2, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, it's Mrs. Andrews, and it says virtual open house. I've had an opportunity to speak with the superintendent as well as Wanda Paul, our chief of operations, but I got this idea from our Council of Great City Schools as I sit in on the Friday conferences. And I think we've done some of this already, but I'm talking about a video presentation, especially for the parents as well as the community, about what school will look like as we begin to go back into brick and mortar. Now, we saw some of these pictures when we did the town halls for the different regions, where we saw the bus drivers and saw some of the custodians cleaning and doing some of the things necessary. But I think parents want to see how it will look if we're going back into a middle school, an elementary school, a high school with the spacing piece, how it would look, you know, with the buses, if we're going to have panels behind the driver. And if we had some type of video, a virtual presentation on the front of our website, that if a parent was deciding whether I'm coming back to the district's public schools or not because I want to feel safe, I can kind of look at some of the things that's happening. I think this would be something that would be ongoing because we'll probably be making changes as we go and get ready for the brick and mortar piece. But some of the districts, some of the large districts across the United States have done these open houses, and it seems like it was pretty popular. So I think it's a wonderful way to get information to people who are really trying to decide what they're going to do with their children. It's good for teachers to see it as well as parents, children, because they're all kind of anxious to get back to brick and mortar. And the more information we can share with them about how we're going to keep them safe, the better.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, not only do I agree with Ms. Andrews, we already started working on this. And so I want to share with the board, Communications created numerous videos, as Ms. Andrews stated, throughout the summer and has been shared widely. Cleaning, summer learning, digital divide, construction, all in multiple languages. On August the 3rd, I will record a back-to-school message for students and staff. This will release before classes begin on August the 31st. Shortly after, I'll record another video which may be described as a virtual open house. This will be released before students start returning to brick and mortar. The video will give a comprehensive overview of what students will encounter from the moment they arrive at the bus stop or parent drop-off line to the traffic flow and social distancing of students inside schools, the configuration of classrooms to the availability of sanitizers and soap, all the way through the end of the day. As far as the classroom configuration, we spoke to the principals of the day. There are many variables, so this will look different to accommodate the unique contributing factors at every school. Desk size, tables, shape of room, square footage, all of those things. And the chief of police and his team and operations have worked through this as well. Work is currently underway to determine important elements such as the configuration of desks, and more importantly, flow patterns in school. So, those of us that were high school principals, how are we going to transition kids in those environments? It's very interesting when you're on these national calls. You have to recognize a lot of school districts are much, much smaller than us. And so when they think about it, they say, oh, we'll just move the teachers around. Well, in the average high school class in our district, they all have different schedules. So there's no way to move all the teachers around. So we have to work through those pieces as we think about it. But I'm very excited that the regionals and the principals already started doing that work. Additionally, we have a news conference scheduled for August the 18th. That will take place at Fulton Holland, and we will stream that live. We also will have phone banks with operators speaking in multiple languages, and that will open on August 19th and run through the first week of school or longer if needed. So those are just some of our current thoughts and actions that we're moving towards, but I wanted to share that with the board as you continue the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy. I guess that pretty well answers all of our questions on that one. Thank you very much. Board members, I neglected to ask if you had any comments, and the superintendent certainly may have had some comments when we were up in that section. I guess it was in a hurry to get through that part of the agenda. Mr. Superintendent, do you have any comments you'd like to make tonight?
Yes, sir. I don't think you were trying to rush through it. It just happens. But good afternoon, everyone. The district remains hard at work as we prepare to welcome back students via distance learning on August the 31st. 2 questionnaires were distributed this week, one to parents and others to staff. Whether you're a parent, a member of Team Palm Beach, or both, I encourage you to fill out the survey that applies to you and return it by August the 3rd. The information collected from these questionnaires will assist us as the district ultimately shifts back to in-person instruction. Although our teachers are not due to return to work until August 12th, the level of dedication to professional development and growth continues to prove that our district has some of the best educators in the country. This summer, educators have logged in more than 30,000 times to take part in 265 different professional development courses for virtual learning. Some of these courses involve social emotional learning, Google Classroom, differentiated instruction, which helps teachers adapt methods to the needs of individual students. Speaking of individual needs, I am proud to recognize Ford Eloja, who is one of our extraordinary translators in the multicultural department. Ford has been selected as the chief delegate by the Haitian Diaspora Federation of Florida. Congratulations to you, Ford. This is important to the district because this will continue to help further our connection to Haiti and support our Haitian community within the district, particularly as we are working to develop Haitian Creole language programs. I'd also take this opportunity to thank the district's food service workers who have served more than 4 million grab-and-go meals to our students since campuses closed March 13th. In addition to the dozens of sites we already have open, the district will increase the number to 132 feeding sites beginning on August 11th. When distance learning begins on August 31st, the number of sites will be increased further. Again, a big thank you to everyone on Team Palm Beach who is involved for your hard work up until this date and the harder work that we have to do for the remainder of this month. Mr. Chairman, those are my comments at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy. Board comments, Ms. McQuinn, do you have anything you wanted to say tonight? If you do, go ahead.
I actually do. And he was trying to hurry through. We know that. Not really. You're doing a great job. I wouldn't want your position for all the world right now, keeping us all in line. I've learned over my last 3.5 years on the board to do a better job of preparing my comments, from the suggestion of my husband. But I'm not speaking off the cuff about this, but I am speaking without prepared remarks. It's been a few difficult weeks for everyone, superintendent and staff, certainly board members. I think perhaps even more so for our parents. And sometimes even in the same household, parents don't agree. So over a school district this size, we're not all going to agree. But the one thing that I have recognized, and I remind myself to continue doing so, is that parents love their kids. And so I would expect that passion, regardless of whether we are wanting our children in bricks and mortar right away, or whether we never want them back in bricks and mortar. It's all for the love of their children. And so I just wanted to say that when I want to get frustrated if somebody doesn't agree with me, not when I think back about why they are expressing so vehemently their views. So actually, I thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. McQuinn. Mr. Shaw? Ms. Brill? Mrs. Whitfield? Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that in the Glades region, we had an excellent town hall meeting last Thursday. It was sponsored by the Tri-Cities Glades region. Communications about the school district and COVID-19 was presented by the three mayors from Pahokee, Belglade, and South Bay, along with our region superintendent for the Glades region, Angela Moore. Mary Evans was also a presenter, along with our county administrator, Mrs. Baker. And I was there to really bring greetings and talk about how schools will be looking in the future as we go into distance learning and getting back to brick and mortar. The town hall presentation can be found on the Guardians of the Glades Facebook page. And it can also be found at www.brotherchurch.com. And I want to thank the Guardians of the Glades. They have been out in the Glades region, feeding, helping the folks get masks, and educating them on this horrible, horrible condition that we're going through with COVID-19. And so Brother Church, who is one of the leaders at WSWN radio station, he's putting the word out to the parents so they will know what's going on as it relates to COVID-19 as well as the school district. So it was a wonderful activity for me to participate in, but most so getting the word out about how serious it is with COVID-19 and how we're going to do our best to make sure all the children in the Glades get back to instruction, making sure that they have their computers and their internet connections and all the things that they need for success. And lastly, I just want to take this time to say the loss of our great Congressman, John Lewis. He marched and was beaten on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, fighting for civil rights. We all are going to miss him. We're so thankful for all the things he did for this country and taking us to the next level. He taught us how to get in good trouble and making a difference, especially for African Americans. He will be missed, but we must continue his legacy. He has a great legacy as it relates to African Americans, going back to the civil rights for all of us. So our children need to know about this great hero. They've probably seen it on television over the last few days, but we have to emphasize a John Lewis of the world. He was a protester. He started as a teenager, making a difference, getting in good trouble, highlighting the inequities in this United States of America, trying to make a difference and to make the world great. And he reminds me so much of Dr. Martin Luther King, because everything that he did it in a peaceful way. And his body was beaten, his body was bruised, his body was tormented, but it never took his spirit away for making the difference for the United States of America, for all people to be recognized. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Andrews. Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. So to follow Mrs. McQuinn, I am going to give some unscripted comments, which is always dangerous. And I want to follow on the heels of Mrs. Andrews and just say say that we do need to make sure that first that all of our adults and then all of our students understand the story of John Lewis. I just have to share a little bit, if you would just allow me to get sidetracked a bit. So when I was a little girl, after the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, there was this outrage in my house. And as a little girl, I didn't understand all this confusion, but what I knew was that my daddy and his friends were packing to go to Selma. And so part of the story is that a week or two after that infamous march across the bridge, there was another march where thousands and thousands of people joined the original marchers. And so my daddy and his crew were part of that second march. And what I remember is seeing the pictures when he returned. And there was a picture of a man, a black man, with one of those old sandwich boards. And it said, "Who's afraid of hell when there's Selma?" And as a little girl, that stuck with me. And so now to watch as we celebrate the life of this hero is just really important to me that we understand and appreciate his long walk, his good trouble, and that our young people understand that too. And so along the same lines, or related line, just prior to this meeting, I participated partially in some work being organized through the county and the Government Alliance for Racial Equity. And they were presenting the toolkit that the Government Alliance for Racial Equity has on creating a racial equity plan. And I say that because I would hope that this school district, who has an equity policy, moves forward in creating a racial equity plan. And with that, I'll close my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. The week before last, I spoke about how kindness matters. And then last week, I had a meeting with Mr. Oswald, Dr. Sheffield, and Mr. Tierney. And I have to tell you that I was not kind. And I personally apologize to them, but I wanted to publicly apologize to them. The stress level is high for all of us. It's probably as high as it's ever been and will ever be again. And I think we all need to remember, especially me, because I have an interaction with all the staff members regularly every week, that they're doing the best they can under circumstances that none of us ever could have anticipated, and hopefully we'll never have to face again. And we all need to remember that staff is working very, very hard to come up with answers to all the questions that we're giving them. And we all have to remember to just that they're stressed as we are, and that they need some kindness. So I apologize to Dr. Sheffield, Mr. Oswald, and Mr. Tierney. I was not nice to you, and I apologize for that. But we all need to remember that all of us are under extreme amount of stress. One thing I forgot to do was wish Mr. Shaw a happy birthday. Yesterday was his birthday, and so we can't give you a cupcake, Mr. Shaw, because you're home. But when we ever get back here, hopefully someday we'll all be back here. Mrs. Bass will make sure that there's a cupcake in front of your computer when we get back here soon enough. And Mr. Shaw, I think the last board discussion item is yours, and that's BD3. If you want to go ahead and take it now.
Thank you very much. This one, first, I want to start this, and what I'm going to talk about, I don't expect any action today or any effort for staff to have to do additional work. And what I'm about to discuss is simply, I think, one of the most serious issues that we will face long-term as we move out of the distance learning, move into regular instruction, and then at some time when we start moving back into what will be a new normal situation. And that's the issue of how we put together a remediation plan for our students to move forward, because I don't think anybody would disagree that students have struggled for the last several months. And I'm not sure that we're going to see an end to this for several months more. And it's going to just exasperate the whole thing considerably. So what I'm asking is that we support the superintendent and staff in creating a real strategically driven plan for long-term remediation and services to our kids, because here are some of the issues that I think we face. I think one of them is that we will likely have compensatory education requests that will cost us money. I think we're going to have issues that deal with the equitable distribution of our supplies and materials, but equity for our students, because we have students that will struggle through this for a long period of time, our ELL kids. But also we have students that are in our choice programs who are missing labs, that are missing a lot of activities. Some of our choice programs are environmental programs where students would be doing lessons and activities off campus. Those are all going to disappear for a long period of time. But the benefits of the instruction that students get in all of these areas, I think, is a critical need that we have. So I'm hoping that we will be united as a board in letting the superintendent staff begin that discussion and have on their radar screen the issues. I think the biggest challenge we might have may very well be that the state is not going to fund to any satisfactory degree the real needs that we have 2-3 years from now. And it's going to be incumbent on us to be able to move forward and do these things with the resources that we have, knowing we may not be getting either federal or state support on these. And also, I think that it's not too early for us to look that some of these may drive some legislative issues that we need to do and ask Mr. LaFace to work through, because there may be some issues that could be addressed with our advocacy during the legislative session that starts in March. And we need to be able to think these things through. As soon as we finish, in fact, on my other computer, we've got a Greater Florida Consortium meeting going on at the same time, and I'm going to discuss this with them. So I think, again, this is not asking the superintendent to do anything, although in his free time, I'm sure he wouldn't mind doing all these extra things. But please keep it on the radar that this is something that I think will have impact that's well beyond anything that we've seen. So thank you very much.
Mr. Shaw, I appreciate those comments, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. So there hasn't been a board member who has not had this conversation with me. All 7 of you had this exact conversation. So as I look at it, so not only do we have to do it, we will. And I would probably suggest, and Mr. Tierney knows this, once we get school open, we must start working on our next iteration of our strategic plan. In that strategic plan, I propose that it's going to have an equity focus, and this remediation plan has to be a part of that. I mean, this is the reality of where we're at. I think because, the way the board and the previous administration created the strategic plan, it's multiple years. And so I think to your point around, and I think several board members have said in conversations over the last couple of months, we will be dealing with this for years. And so I think as when we think about our strategic planning initiative, I think we memorialize equity, we memorialize this remediation as part of that, along with the other things that we decide. So Mr. Shaw, you're not asking us to do any additional work, because I think that is the work. that absolutely is the work. And so we will commit to that. And Mr. Tierney and I recently talked about strategic planning efforts once we get school started. So it is duly noted, and we will govern ourselves accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. Shaw. I think you probably summarized it for all of us, because we all have the same concerns about how we're ever going to be able to let these kids catch up to where they should be. Ms. Brill and then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. And Mr. Shaw, thank you for bringing that up, because I really think that this will provide us with a venue to be able to help support the children whose parents may not know to ask for this, to make sure that we are equitable, that, talking about remediation for all students is really imperative. ESC students do have the option for compensatory education, but really all of the children are going to need that. And so I think it's wonderful that we're looking at that. And to Dr. Absolutely, this will be a piece in our strategic plan. It has to be, but this is going to help us level the playing field, and it ties very much into equity also. So I welcome our discussions on that.
Go ahead, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Shaw, for bringing this up again. I have snuck in the comment about setting money aside for this kind of catch-up work, if you will. And so I'm really glad to hear Mr. Shaw bring this forward again. I just want to say that while we know that a lot of students had difficulty during distance learning and 1.0 and probably 2.0 as well, hopefully much less so, but there are children that this system was serving just fine before the pandemic. And then there were those that we were not serving just fine. And so I just don't want us to get so focused on the newly fallen behind that we forget the forever fallen behind. And so equity, as I've said before, is blessing them according to their needs. And so let's make sure we do just that. I am really thrilled to hear that all 7 board members have shared this concern. But just remember, there are those who had been left behind, who then had the COVID-19 slide, then had summer slide, then might have another COVID-19 slide. And so let's try to meet the needs of all children and bless them according to their needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Well said. Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And this is such an important area. It gives me a chance to say thank you again to the Boys and Girls Club and all of the other agencies who have picked up the slack while we have been closed and educating our children and helping them emotionally and socially. And we have so many community people that want to be a part of this remediation process. I know that we depend heavily on our teachers, but we have a lot of community groups like the Tri-Cities Education out in the Glades region, the sororities and the fraternities. We have to put a plan together so that it's going to encompass not just the classroom time, but outside of the classroom during the weekend, whatever it takes to help these children that's been left behind before the pandemic and more so behind now that we're into all of this distance learning, and many of them haven't been a part of this process since we started. So we've got to pull a lot more people under our umbrella to help us with this and hear their ideas of how we can help the children. Many times they know a lot about our children as well as our teachers, but a lot more because many times they're right in the neighborhood and they know some of the kinds of things that can be done to help move our children forward. So it's a great thing that we've got to do, but let's add some more to the list to help us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Andrews. Is there any more discussion? All right, we need a motion to adjourn. Before we do that, though, we have a time certain meeting at 5:05, and I was just informed that we can't start it early. So once we adjourn this meeting, we're going to be gone until 5:05, which we'll take up the budget meeting at 5:05. So we have a motion to adjourn this meeting. Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Mrs. Whitfield. Mr. Superintendent, do you have anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Yes, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a personal point of privilege to bring the Deputy Superintendent forward. The business of the district is still moving forward in the middle of a crisis, and we have some exciting news to share.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy. And again, good afternoon, board members. We have some principal changes that are happening here in Palm Beach County. First one I'd like to tell you about is Pamela Buckman, who has been serving the last 6 years out in the Glades at Pioneer Park Elementary. She will be transferring over to Beacon Cove Elementary School. And she's done great work out there in the Glades. I know Ms. Andrews probably miss her greatly. And then we have a vacancy at Point Siena Elementary School due to retirement. And Tanya McDowell, who's been leading assistant principal, most recently at LC Swain, will be taking on the principalship there at Point Siena Elementary School. So when we do get back to the building, we will have Tanya McDowell come in before the board to be able to say some remarks. I wanted to let you know about those changes. So thank you.
And I also like the team, Keith, if we could please get a list of all of our principals who are retiring so that we can acknowledge them at our next board meeting.
Fantastic. We'll do that.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm done. Thank you.
Dr. Fano, if we have a list of all the principals that are retiring, you're just going to scare us, so we probably shouldn't.
No, it's not like that. It's not like that, sir.
Mrs. Anders, go ahead. You had your hand up.
I just want to say I'm so happy for Mrs. Buckman, but I'm just so sad too. Ms. Buckman came to Pioneer Park Elementary School along with her team and moved that school up to a B level. She is awesome. She comes all the way from Jupiter. All those years, she was truly committed to making a difference at Pioneer Park. She has relatives and has a history in the Glades region because this is where she came from. And she truly was someone that walked the walk, talked the talk, and made a difference for all of the children at Pioneer Park. I know the people there are very sad. They're happy and sad at the same time. So Mr. Superintendent and everyone, Mr. Oswald, we've got to get a great leader that can continue her work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Anders. If there's no further discussion, we'll take a vote on the motion to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. See you all at 5:05 p.m. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The first public hearing of the school board of Palm Beach County regarding the 2020-2021 tentative budget is called to order. Final hearing to adopt the budget will be held on September 9th, 2020 at 5:05 p.m. The purpose of these hearings is to listen to the public regarding the superintendent's proposed millage rates and tentative budget. The board's agenda for this meeting includes the proposed millage levies, agenda item B1, and the tentative budget for fiscal year 2021. Agenda item B2, the school board may and will amend the tentative budget prior to the final public hearing in September. Would the board clerk please call the roll?
District 1, Barbara McQuinn.
Here.
District 2, Chuck Shaw.
Here. Here.
District 3, Karen Brill.
Here.
District 4, Erica Whitfield.
Here.
District 5, Frank Barbieri.
Here.
District 6, Marcia Andrews.
Here.
District 7, Deborah Robinson.
Here.
We have, of course, the superintendent is also with us this evening, Dr. Fenoy, Mrs. Michael, our Inspector General, and our General Counsel, Julie Enrico. At this point, Dr. Fenoy, before we move forward, we have two members of the public that would like to speak to us. They're recorded messages. Would the IT department please play those two messages at this time?
Hello, my name is Terry Jones. My comment is about the proposed tax increase. I am not in favor of any tax increase at this time. Present conditions understood. A tax increase, in my opinion, is a slap in the face. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Good evening, board members, superintendent. My name is Justin Katz. I'm calling in to lead public comment during the budget hearing today, and specifically on item B2, the resolution adopting the tentative budget. I just wanted to praise the school district superintendent, staff, and the school board for maintaining the salary allocation that you had proposed and discussed in prior meetings on the budget. It's critical, especially at this time, for teachers to maintain that allocation, because with the increase in minimum teacher salary for new and newer teachers from the state and the law that was passed and signed by the governor recently, that means that almost only local funds can be used for raises for veteran teachers who have been teaching for 10, 20, or 30 years, who were almost entirely excluded from the law that was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. We appreciate your dedication to your employees and the teachers of the school district. We're working hard right now to make sure that distance learning and this entire school year go off as smoothly as possible for our students, as well as you, our employer, because their teachers are professionals, they're dedicated. And again, I just wanted to thank you for maintaining the salary allocation this year, and CTA looks forward to working with your staff to negotiate fair raises for veteran teachers who are almost exclusively left out of the increase in teacher pay by the legislature and the governor. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your night.
Mr. Superintendent, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Before you are two agenda items that I am recommending for the millage levies and 2020-2021 tentative budget. These items are brought forward to comply with TRIM, Truth in Millage legislation. Before I make my recommendations, Mr. Burke will present the millage rates and proposed budget. Mr. Burke?
Yes, good evening, school board. Dr. Fenoy. This is an unusual year, and I'd like to first thank the board and your board, the board's budget advisory committee, for sticking it out through this virtual environment. We've been able to maintain and adhere to the budget calendar we set out in December. We've had several workshops. This is, not our first meeting on the budget, and your budget advisory committee worked as well. We've met with them remotely to continue that work. So we do have a budget recommendation for you tonight. It's tentative. The budget will no doubt change a little bit between now and September 9th for final adoption. But I did want to call your attention. The budget advisory committee, one of the jobs they do for us is they do an annual report each year, and that's attached to your agenda. And the committee did fully support the budget recommendation that's in front of you tonight. This COVID-19 pandemic has really forced us to realign our budget priorities. Now the student and staff health safety, shoring up distance learning to improve on that and bolstering our reserves has become critically important. We have some good news, right? That the governor did approve the budget that was approved by the legislature back on March 19th. So we're starting at a pretty good place considering the environment we're in. But I remain concerned that the state will not be able to sustain this level of funding throughout the year. And we're going to have to continue to monitor this. On August 14th, there will be a very critical general revenue estimating conference. The results of that conference is really going to drive the future deliberations of our legislature. And it's, we still have some uncertainty, but if the current economic conditions persist, the state's going to run short of money. And I'm concerned that at some point, as early as sometime next school year, that we could feel the impact of that. So that's why it's been critical. We've gone through department budget reductions. We're doing everything we can to save money. Mrs. Canusa is going to get into the numbers later, but we have been shoring up a reserve, basically, to deal with the additional costs associated with COVID-19, all the PPE, all the things we're doing, the additional professional development time. And then also to have that reserve ready in case we do experience some state budget cuts down the road. So I feel that's a wise thing to do. Our staff is also closely monitoring the work in Washington, D.C. by Congress. There's a good prospect now that we may get some additional stimulus money. So we had, the House came out a while back with their HEROES Act. That HEROES Act would have provided $70 billion to K-12 education across the country. The Senate's recent proposal that they're calling the HEALS Act would provide actually $70 billion to K-12 education. So we're in that 60 to 70 billion range for K-12 schools. Just to give you some context, the stimulus approved to date through the CARES Act provided $13.5 billion. So this is a substantial increase, 4 to 5 times that amount. But even if that holds true and is approved, it's going to fall short of what we experienced in the Great Recession with the ERA funds. That reached $100 billion in total for K-12 education. But the thought is more stimulus dollars are going to be needed to prop up states across the country as their revenues continue to fall short of projections. So we're monitoring that. I want to just acknowledge right up front, normally when we come to you each year at this time of the budget, one of our top priorities is establishing a salary reserve for employee bargaining considerations. And this budget in front of you tonight does not have a salary reserve. What it does have is the categorical funds approved by our governor and legislature to improve classroom teacher pay and to raise that starting salary to $47,500. And there is some of those funds can be used to address the veteran teachers and teachers that fall outside of the definition of classroom teacher. So we must negotiate a plan with CTA by October 1st. And we'll be working on that in short order and coming back to the board. But I just want to be clear up front that right now, really, those state dollars are the only dollars that we feel are available for salary increase in this environment. I think the board has to really hang on to all the resources we can to be able to ride this storm out. So that's kind of where the budget stands in terms of salaries. There is kind of a new addition. We revised the presentation yesterday. You may have got an update late yesterday or today. You're going to see, we added the 2 days for professional development for our teachers last week with the calendar change. That prompted the need. We were looking at our preparations for opening a school year and working with our school principals. And we have some of our other school support staff that now with this 3-week kind of delay to the school year, we're normally with their contracts, we'd have to send them home for a couple breaks in between now and the start of school year. And what we'd like to do is spend about $2 million to bring back some key personnel that are going to be involved with getting schools ready and handing out devices. This includes the assistant principals, our school technicians, our data processors, our language facilitators that help with interpretations for the parents. And so you're going to see a line item of another $2 million really to help with getting ready for the start of school year. And Ms. Knust will be going through all that in just a minute. I think I've covered my comments, so I appreciate your attention. I'm going to turn it over now to Ms. Knust to take you through the presentation, what's going on with our proposed tax rates and the budget highlights. Thank you. Ms. Knust.
Okay, good evening. So the purpose of the meeting today is really for the board to adopt the tentative millage rates as well as the tentative budget. And so that's why we're starting with the certified school taxable value, to give you a historical look back of what the property values have been, because that's what the millage rate will be applied to. So there has been an increase from FY20 to FY21 of 5%. You can see that rate of increase each year is starting to slow down, and we really are not sure at this point what FY22 will look like. Our millage rate for FY20 is 7.01 mils. That is a slight decrease from the prior year. The majority of the millage rate is actually set by the state legislature. And the other components that are allowed to be set by the school board are also capped by state statute. So even though our millage rate has declined, that it's 7.01, it's actually 1.52% greater than the rollback rate. The rollback rate is the rate that would be charged and applied to the current year property tax value to generate the same amount of revenue as the prior year. So since we had a 5% increase in the total school taxable value, we have to decrease that millage rate even more to be able to collect the same amount of revenue. So what does that really mean to a homeowner? So looking at a sample homeowner who has a home with a taxable value of $200,000, assuming that there's no increase in the assessed value year over year, we'll see a decrease in their property tax bill of $30.80. Our total budget for FY21 is nearly $3.9 billion. That's an increase of over $300 million. Looking at the increase in the general fund of $97 million, that's primarily due to the increase in the FEFP, which includes the increase for charter schools, family empowerment scholarship, and also McKay. Remember, for the FEFP purposes, we received an increase as a result for the increase in the FRS rates. That also includes the teacher salary allocation as well. And looking at the special revenue other, I wanted to highlight that's all of our federal, state, and local grants that are not food service related. And the reason why it looks like there's a decline in FY21 is we receive a lot of these awards throughout the year. So we will continue to amend the budget throughout the year, and we expect it to be relatively similar to FY20. I also want to note there that the CARES Act money is not included in FY20 or FY21 because we have not received an official award notification from FDOE. It is possible that it's going to be split between both years, but you'll be able to see that reflected in any future budget amendments. And the increase in capital projects, that aligns with the capital plan, the projects in the capital plan. So what's most important to highlight with this budget is that all funds are balanced. We've been able to establish a reserve of nearly $43 million. We were able to do that based on projected increase in beginning fund balance, which we're still closing out the year. So that is still an estimated number that will likely change once we get to final adoption, as well as the savings that we generated from the department reorganizations. It includes that increase in FRS, as well as that new teacher salary allocation program. And then the capital budget includes having one device for every student. So we do know we are going to have additional costs related to COVID-19. And through the cost that we are aware of, at least through today, approximates $22 million. And we are looking as a district as to what funding sources we're eligible to receive that these expenses can be charged to. So we have available to us the reserve that we set aside, as well as the CARES Act and FEMA, and we keep monitoring and looking for other funds that we might be able to utilize and apply for these expenses as we know that we're going to see increase throughout the year. So today the board is being asked to adopt the tentative millage rates as well as the FY21 tentative budget. On August 26th, there will be a workshop for the capital plan. And then on September 9th, we'll have final budget adoption.
So very nice, Ms. Fanous. That's our brief presentation. As the superintendent said, you've got 2 action items in front of the board. And at this point, we're happy to take any questions the board may have.
Mr. Superintendent, I've got a question, if I might. Mr. Burke, I'm not sure whether this is part of this recommendation or the next one, but I'm concerned that our rookie teachers, some of them are getting a 15% pay raise. I'm just concerned about the morale for the older teachers. I thought we could put some money towards, other than the state money, to try and help that, because the morale's got to be terrible among the older teachers. I mean, people out there in the community may think it's going to be easier for our teachers to teach virtually than it is in a classroom, and I feel exactly the opposite. I think it's much more difficult for our teachers to have to figure out how they're going to teach all these children that are not in front of them physically in their classroom, and to tell them that we're not going to at least give them cost of living increase. I'm not sure what the cost of living was this year, but we need to do something to help the veteran teachers that they're getting basically nothing from the state money. I mean, we all discussed before that we weren't real happy with the governor's plan to allocate that money only to brand new teachers. All of our teachers deserve to make more, based on their education. They're all professionals, 4-year degrees. So is there nothing we have in the budget that can be to help that, to close up that, or to help that those teachers that are actually, what do we have, 8 teachers that have been 8 years are going to be making the same as teachers that came on last year. So I mean, what are we doing to try and fix that, or what can we do to fix that?
So, Mr. Barbieri, we've run the numbers. The state's provided us the $31.7 million. And the way the statute, it's very prescriptive, but 80% of that money has to be used to get you to that $47,500 starting salary for classroom teachers. If you have any money left over, you can then use the balance to help. You can couple that with the other 20% to address your veteran teachers and the teachers that fall outside of the state's definition of a classroom teacher. So we've run all the numbers. The good news is we can get to $47,500 for the classroom teachers, and actually, for the guidance counselors, the media specialists. We always look at the teachers as one big bargaining unit, and we've always had one salary schedule. And I feel like that's really beneficial to the district and the employees. So that would be my recommendation, right? That we try to stick to where, as long as you're a teacher or a guidance counselor, you all start at $47,500. You can get to that point, and you still have some money left over for a raise. And we've run the numbers, and what the money will do, we have about $11 million left over. You can ensure that every teacher gets at least a 1.7% raise. So you're right, that new teacher that's going from $41,000 to $47,500, they're going to get about a 16% raise. But what we could do is guarantee, and this is all subject to bargaining with the union and their acceptance, but we could guarantee basically a 1.7% raise for all of our teachers. That would hopefully offset the cost of living you mentioned. I understand that falls short. We've had a track record where the last 5 years we've done about a 3% raise for our employees each year. And this board was pretty courageous because we approved that last raise on March 18th when we had closed our schools on March 13th. So, and I don't think any of us knew how bad what we were about to go into, but again, we're putting all the money available into this reserve to help deal with the unknown and help deal with COVID-19. And, I heard the board's discussion earlier that we're probably going to have to do more to help address this COVID slide and, give the kids some additional instruction. So that's going to be the choice that you boil down to. But, some of us worked through this with the Great Recession, and I always kind of prioritized protecting the district and protecting employees' jobs first before you would consider a raise. And, I think we're at risk. And I think we really need to monitor the situation and let it play out before we start thinking about increasing our salaries in an environment where we might be forced later to downsize our workforce.
Right. I've always said before, Mr. Burke, it's amazing that you're able to keep a budget this huge balanced, and I appreciate the hard work. I would just like a commitment from the superintendent that with the $43 million we're setting aside for COVID and other issues that might come up with helping the kids catch up, that if there's, if we don't use all of that money, I want it to go back to our employees, because we're taking it away from them this year, putting it into a reserve account. And so if we don't use that money for that, I think it needs to go back to those teachers that they're only getting the very small raise, to make sure that we somehow try to increase the spread between the new teachers and the veteran teachers, so we eliminate that morale situation, especially when they're all going to be working their tails off over the next year to try and figure out a way to make sure our kids get the best education possible while they're all home somewhere. So
yeah, Mr. Chairman, we'll definitely put that on the list of things to consider, as we get through whatever the state tells us what they've done. So we'll put that on the list. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Is there any other discussion from any board members? Mr. Superintendent, do you want to go ahead and make your recommendation then?
No. You have Ms. McQuinn and Ms. Andrews are both raising their hand, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I can't see them. Let me see where they're at here.
Okay, I've had my hand up. I know it's rude because it basically is saying be quiet, Frank, and let me talk, but I knew you didn't see me. Okay, I just am asking a clarification question. I'm referring to our referendum monies when our most veteran teachers got the highest amount. Talk me through that again. And part of that was in to help address this piece between our more newly hired teachers and our veteran teachers. How has that been impacted?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. McQuinn, for the question, because you're right on the money. The good thing about the referendum, and the board was wise in how that was structured, is that it helps combat this compression issue, right? Because it recognizes the teacher's tenure and experience. So that we had the $1,000 referendum supplement for teachers that have 1 year of experience under their belt, and then that goes after 5 years up to $5,000, and 10 years $10,000. So that will not change. We still have the benefit of that. Obviously, as the starting salaries, the base salaries come up, it does impact compression, but at least we do have that. Those referendum supplements are still something that the experienced teachers will benefit from.
Mrs. Andrews, go ahead.
Thank you. And first of all, I'd like to compliment our own Mr. Mike Burke, who is the leader of the finance offices for the Council of Great City Schools. And this is the 75 largest school districts across the nation. So he has led the exercise on financial issues as it relates to this school year with COVID issues and so on. So we are just thrilled to have him at the table here. So just a few things I wanted to say. I'm just happy to have a balanced budget. And I worry, and I think I asked this question last week about the district's projected enrollment. I wonder about how many children will be homeschooled or will go to private school or charters. So that's going to be something that we'll have to look at, because I keep hearing from many parents that they may not be bringing their children back. But what I worry about too is not having enough money as we go through this COVID experience that we're in right now. And it looks like you said, Mike, we're going to have enough to cover us for this year. But as I sit in those meetings, I worry, because I was happy about the heroes, but it's kind of sitting there dormant right now, waiting on the Senate to come up with some money. So if we come up with that money this year, that will make a difference for all of us as it relates to what's happening within our educational system. So when I look at it and I see, the $8.8 million for professional development, that's great. Teachers do need that training. And I love to see the extra duty days for the support people like your ITSAs and those people with technology and other support folks. They really need to have the time and attention given so that they can move the computer computers and get everything set up for teachers and schools to make it all work for our distance learning. And then when I look at this 5.0 million for the student and staff face coverings, and I wonder, because we don't know how long we're going to be in this mode with COVID-19, and when we get back to brick and mortar, how much of this will we need? And when I look at this 5.0 million, is that going to be enough for the PPEs, for the ESE and ELL and the teachers and the students? And so if you can come back and tell me, how long will that last? Will that last us for the remainder of the year? And so when we talk about our internet, thank goodness we have our funders, the folks who have been out there helping us out. Many have contributed monies so that we can actually have that internet access, but putting this money aside to make sure everyone will have internet access for 20,000 children, when we remember we had about 16,000 that didn't even have internet access this past year. So when I look at all this, the capital maintenance for the computers and the supplemental budget, is this going to be enough to carry us if we don't get this additional money? I'm appreciative for the CARES Act money, but as I sit in these meetings every day, the superintendents as well as the school board members are saying, as well as you've said, Mike, will this be able to carry us if we don't get those additional funds?
So yes, Ms. Andrews, first, thank you for the nice comments. I think I credit it to endurance, and once you get enough gray hair, they start putting you in charge of things, I guess. But you got some great questions there. I guess it's too early to tell. I mean, we are buying what we feel like we need to start the school year, and we're buying a pretty large quantity of face coverings for both our students and staff. And we have a pretty hefty order now that we're going to be placing for some of our ESE staff that need extra protective measures. But I know we've allocated some additional funds to our schools to buy hand sanitizer and things like that. And I'm fairly certain that we're going to burn through some of those supplies and have to replenish them. There was an executive order by the governor. One of the really good things they did was they said they were going to hold school districts harmless for your enrollment in October. So that was one of your current concerns, right? If our enrollment dips, normally we'd lose the money immediately. Now we're kind of safe for the first semester of the school year anyway. And so I think we're about as good shape as we can be. But then, not to scare everybody, but if you look at what's going on with the state economy, we're losing at least 20% a month of the state revenues that normally come in, and most of that's sales tax. So if sales tax money represents about half our budget, and the other half's property tax. And property taxes have been stable, and we hope they stay that way. But if sales tax continue to be down 20%, at some point that's going to reach us. And so then you figure we could lose basically 10%, half of our operating budget is tied to sales tax. We could lose 10% of that. And our operating budget is over $2 billion. So, if you take a 2% hit, you just lost $200 million. And that $42 million reserve is going to look kind of small. And that's why this HEROES Act, or the HEALS Act, is so important. I mentioned earlier that the CARES Act to date was $13.5 million, and we got our share of that's a little over $30 million. So if we can get additional round of stimulus that provides 60 or 70 billion across the country, 4 to 5 times greater, then the share in Palm Beach County, 4 to 5 times 30 million could be 120 to 150 million. During the Great Recession, we got over 200 million AIR funds. So yes, those federal dollars, I think, are going to prove to be critically important. And you can see the kind of the magnitude of the potential problem. And if we've got our 40 million and the HEALS Act comes in and we've got potentially, another 120 to 150 million, then you're in the ballpark, right? You got a fighting chance to keep things going. And that would be my hope. There's still a lot of uncertainty around all this. It's day to day in some cases. And but I do feel like we've put ourselves in the best position possible. And we're fortunate, our health insurance fund is doing well. Some of my colleagues around the state and the country, they've got other issues outside of COVID that are throwing them into budget deficits. Their health insurance is up 20%, what have you. So knock on wood always, but right now I feel like we're about the best shape we can be, but we've got to be frugal and we got to like hold on to every dollar we can until things start getting better.
And I'd like to just add on to that, Mike, for the board and everyone else, that thank goodness for our Council of Great City School for their legislative advocacy. They're on the Hill working with the senators as we work through this process of getting this money. They were very instrumental with the CARES money and working with our heroes. But right now, you know, it's in the Senate now. And so our council is up there with as much work that can be done to begin to continue to work with the senators to see if we can get things moving. And if you can talk to any of the senators that you know, to help them to kind of move it. If we don't get this money, it's going to be an issue for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My question is related to the slide that you showed with the additional costs related to COVID. I have one concern, but then also a request. I'm not sure that 5 days is going to be adequate to meet the needs of the schools. And if there's ever been a time that we need to be effective and efficient to get everything done that needs to be done for the opening of schools, I think this is a time that we need to be in that position to deal with that. So I'm a little concerned about that. But related to the conversation that we've had about these extra potential costs and whether or not they're adequate, either Mr. Burke or Dr. Fenoy or Ms. Rico, what is the most efficient way that we could approve this budget and give authority to staff to make budget changes as quickly and efficiently as possible, either through budget amendments or whatever is the most efficient way for us to make changes? So if, as Mrs. Andrews said about the face coverings and those PPE, if we need to deal with that, I want to know that staff can deal with it and not have to wait for an extended period of time for us to meet to make these decisions, because when they're needed, they're needed. If we need additional days for people to get school opened or make changes, we need it because we need it to be done then. So can someone give me an idea on how the board can be efficient on making that decision?
I can take a shot at it. The school districts are kind of unique in Florida because our fiscal year actually started July 1st. And we have this allowance where the board does not approve the budget for, like the first week of September. This year, September 9th. But we always work hard to make sure the board's informed of any significant decisions related to the budget as we go. And that's why we try to just keep you up to date through these workshops. This is a tentative budget. So we're asking you to go ahead and vote on this tonight. But we do have the latitude to make adjustments and bring back, that final budget recommendation September 9th. And if we feel like we need to put more money into some of these programs, we could do that. And, I'd probably just still work with the superintendent to kind of keep the board informed along the way. What we don't want to do is get to the final vote and surprise you, right? And have you say, wait a minute, that's not what we were thinking. So it's kind of like a delicate balance, I guess, but we do kind of have, it's kind of unique. We do have some ability, I guess, to adjust the budget and bring you back that final recommendation and make some changes as needed between now and then.
Okay, thank you. I think that helps. And one other issue, Dr. Fenoy, are there any ways that a lot of the people, we've got hundreds of people who are not working right now, they're assigned to home. Are there any things that we can do to reallocate those people to school centers during the time of trying to get school open to be of assistance in these schools and help out the principals and teachers during that time?
So, Mr. Shaw, a couple of things. On that last question, my direct reports, Mr. Burke and the operations team, we talked about that today. So they are literally working on those particular alternative job assignments, but we also have to bring them through the unions as well. And so we have been doing that, and we know that is on our list to make sure that that gets done. So we're further exploring that. I think on the other side, I just wanted to mention, and especially in terms of PPE, and I think the community needs to understand this, we have not we have not delayed in purchasing this stuff. We have warehouses full of masks, and so we've been moving forward with these purchases. And Mike is absolutely right. We try to just make sure that we continue to let you know that masks have been purchased, gowns. We just got another request based on last week's conversation with our special ed, getting their PPE in. So we're moving. Computers have been ordered, and so we realized that Mike really kept pressing on us in really late June, early July, in order to say what things do we need to buy so we can get in line, because these requests are coming from the entire world at this point. And so I'm very pleased with the status. Our warehouse is full. We've even sent out some allocations to the schools to start buying hand sanitizers, but we also recognize that a lot of this was tentative. And as we get clear, I think we know we have enough to get started, but you're right. We have to continue to monitor to make sure that we have the money to buy as we keep moving forward.
Any other discussion? I'm sorry, I don't know if my mic was on. Did you hear? Is there any further discussion by anyone? If not, Mr. Superintendent, you want to go ahead and make your recommendation?
Yes, sir. Item B1. I recommend the school board adopt the proposed millage levies of 7.0100 mills for fiscal year 2021. The total millage rate is 1.52% greater than the rollback rate and is made up of 3.7550 mills for required local effort, 0.0070 mills for prior period RLE adjustment, 0.7480 mills for discretionary operating, 1.5 mills for local capital improvement, and 1 mill for additional operating. That is item B1, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a motion by Dr. Robinson, seconded by Ms. Brill? Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. B2, Mr. Superintendent?
Yes, item B2. I recommend the school board adopt the tentative district summary budget in the amount of $3,862,185,599 for fiscal year 2021. This includes the district's organizational chart and school board statement of its organization and operation.
Mr. Superintendent, I think you said 99 instead of 89.
I stand corrected, 89.
Great. Do we have a motion? Motion by Mrs. Andrews, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Mr. Superintendent, do you have anything else you'd like to discuss?
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing else to discuss at this time.
All right, board members, unless you have something burning that you want to discuss this evening, we are through with the agenda. If I need to get a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, seconded by Mrs. Andrews. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Burke and Dr. Fenoy and Ms. Knust. Have a nice evening, everyone. Meeting is adjourned.